Nice to be with you all this evening. We're going to talk about a topic which hopefully doesn't happen to you very often, but I can't imagine that it doesn't, because it is a challenging industry in many cases, and we all encounter setbacks and difficulties. And so our topic this evening is maintaining a winning mindset through the endless grind and hustle. So I have two questions for you. Number one, what do we mean by a winning mindset? What does that mean to you? That's question number one. And question number two, when we talk about the challenges, if you will, in other words, what would represent a win for you in our conversation this evening? What's a problem that you encounter, without getting overly technical, but what's a type of challenge you encounter that if we quote unquote solved it, or better yet, just addressed it, I'm not sure we can solve anything definitively, but if we addressed it this evening in a meaningful way, gave you some strategies, techniques that would help you, would put you in a better position to do your work effectively already tomorrow. Okay, so those are the two questions. Number one, what does a winning mindset look like to you? And number two, and they're really kind of flip sides of the same question if you think about it. Second one is, what are some of the key challenges that you encounter that a breakthrough, that an improved mindset would help you with? What would be a kind of challenge that if we were able to address it this evening from a mindset perspective, would give you the tools and the ammunition to be more effective in your work tomorrow? A different way of thinking about something, a different way of doing something. I get stuck on X a lot. I encounter this problem frequently.
We discussed a winning attitude is an attitude that entails a vision of a particular goal,
Okay.
and being able to, with discipline, withstand external, internal cynicism, resistance, hiccups, and the like, to be able to transcend those and to continue with the same level of commitment towards set goal.
Beautiful. So if I could write that down, I would have written things like focus, resilience, persistence, goal setting. Right now, the goal setting in many ways is separate from the attitudinal or behavioral pieces that you described, but they do go together, right? Oftentimes, if I have a goal to set, I will push through.
One thing I would say is,
yes,
most people say seeing is believing. I've kind of shifted, and I think believing is seeing.
Clarify what you mean.
When you are committed to a belief so much, you will manifest it.
Nice.
Because we will typically look for
You're
evidence.
creating like a mental picture, and you're so clear in your mind what that vision looks like that you then go after it.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Always be afraid of someone, no matter how small they are, who's more committed to kicking your toughest in the schoolyard fight than you are.
I hear that. I'm now going to be on very careful alert as I pivot in this room. Anyone over here wanted to add on this first question about winning mindset?
I think that was a very good point. So I think that not to get discouraged. Real estate is the world of almost. You get this close and then boom.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that personally. It's not just a real estate thing. I mean, I just signed up a client after setting up a proposal, and all of a sudden, after signing the proposal, and moving sort of almost there, I didn't actually receive payment yet for the the down payment, but we were as close as you can almost be, so to speak. And then he emails me as some kind of whatever it is, change in thought and this that, wants to push it back, a couple of months, whatever it is. Whether that will eventually happen or not remains to be seen. In part, it's a decision I have to make, because if I want to engage with somebody who's already vacillating and can't decide if he wants to be in or out, is this somebody who, from my perspective, is somebody I should be working with? Not our conversation for tonight. It's my issue. I'm sorry?
That's what it needs you for.
Potentially. Potentially, but the question also is, as a coach, sometimes you want to ask yourself, is this person ready to be coached? And that's an important question. Again, I don't want to jump into the weeds in my industry, but I'm just sharing that it's a common issue.
I want to add just two things. I think in real estate, you spend way more time with a customer. You bring in way more, and it's more of an intimate relationship. It's not just, okay, yes or no. And at the last second, when they say that, no, we can really hurt you.
Sure can.
You already have that commission scenario.
You have no, and the numbers are way bigger.
Yeah.
You're dreaming about a commission. That's
Yeah. And there are
paid what they get paid.
right. No one will pay you for your effort.
right. So it's interesting that what you're touching on here a little bit is more, let's call it the selling and the selling strategy, and how do you close. And some of that is not necessarily what we call industry specific, but these are the kinds of skills that would be useful for you to develop and really hone, because if you have them, then in many cases you could bring those people who are sort of teetering on the brink there, not sure yay or nay, and bring them along to safety because they trust you and you're able to sort of walk them through. Zig Ziglar, for example, would be a great resource if you're not familiar, and there are many others as well. But I listen to, just a little hack of mine, since I'm on the road a lot, I have an Audible subscription, and I listen to audiobooks all the time. And if you can, even if you don't see yourself as being in the business of selling, everybody's in the business of selling. So whether it's Dan Pink, To Sell is Human, Zig Ziglar, many others, get into what does it mean, what's going on in the head of the other person. And if you can figure out what's that mental picture, what's that challenge, what's that issue that they're dealing with, and you can anticipate it and use language that's going to create safety and comfort, the likelihood of you closing is going to be a lot stronger and more successful. So these are just things we should be aware of. Oftentimes we think that it's all in the technical skill. I understand, that's not, oh my goodness, that's not supposed to be on, so my apologies for that. Just hit the do not disturb. But the idea is that oftentimes it's all about the soft skill. And that's a piece we have to think about. This is really about mental and soft skill-related focus anyway. Let's talk about the other piece of it for a moment. What would be something that if we were able to solve it in our few minutes together this evening would, or at least give you strategies towards an improved situation, would give you a feeling like this was really worth my while?
Time management.
Time management. Can you elaborate, please?
Not enough time in the day.
Too many things to deal with? Constant interruptions?
Yeah,
things of the sort?
especially with technology in the picture, it takes a lot of time.
Okay.
Sometimes
So
it's the solution.
I did just,
Sometimes it's the solution.
No, it's not.
I will tell you,
Try to make it work.
I didn't come to address time management per se, but I will stay on it for just a moment to give you something. So if I don't give you anything else, at least you feel like you had something there. Oftentimes we have what we call a to-do list. And we create, a list of 125,000 things, and luckily, we'd be lucky if we take care of a handful of them on any given day. To-do lists, generally speaking, are not a very effective way to manage your tasks, because ultimately, more things get added to the to-do list, you feel like you're never caught up, and it's hard to prioritize. It's hard to know, what do I really focus on? We could jump into Stephen Covey and the urgent, important, all the different areas of the matrix. You might be familiar with that. We could talk about the various levels of significance of various tasks that we have. But one thing that I would recommend, and this could be very valuable to you, is to block your calendar. So if, for example, you have what you anticipate as a 30-minute or a 60-minute task, that if you devoted yourself full focus on that task, it would take no more than X number of minutes. Literally put on your calendar from 10 until 11, or whatever time, working on X. And that keeps all other items off of your calendar. I don't know if you work with other people and they have access to your calendar, but it blocks it and it keeps it clean. And this way you know that now is my time to do this. And that alone would be very valuable. That's exactly right. We will talk about, through a goal-setting exercise, a way by which, something similar to what we just talked about actually, so you'll see an application of it that it could be useful to you. Anyone else on what would represent a breakthrough for you, or a meaningful goal or achievement, if we hit on it tonight?
Focus.
Clarify, please, what you mean. Did everyone hear what he said? Repeat it, please. Focus. Okay.
It touches a little bit of what he said. That's what I was thinking about. But you think that there's not enough time in the day, and if you focus on the things that you're doing, you find that the 10 hours that you're working really ends up being, a typical day, a lot more than if you weren't focused on those specific things. So if you set a goal that you had 5 things on your list, you took a to-do list to do, even though if you took care of those 5 items, if you were focused on each one, you might do those 5 things faster.
Okay, good. And there are other things you could think about, like when am I most energized, for example. I do my best work first thing in the morning. That's just the way I am. I like to come back from davening, from prayers, and just get to my computer and knock off a couple of things right off the bat where my mind is most clear and focused. And oftentimes we have things that are most cognitively demanding. Let's say you're in writing or you have to deal with legal stuff or other things that you really need to be in your space without distraction. First thing in the morning could be a great time for you because other people are not up and about yet, right? The office is not really humming. People are not inundating your inbox. And on top of it, close off all distractions. In fact, with millennials, oftentimes they're doing work and they've got their phones down here. And it's kind of like this continuous distraction. But research has actually found that even keeping your phone on your desk, face down, or maybe even on Do Not Disturb, also draws your mind to some degree away from the work. So the more that you could put your technology to the side, keep your, there are apps that you could use that will shut down your browser for a period of time or close out certain applications or things like that for certain periods of time. And that will allow you to be more focused in your work. So those are all things to think about.
My phone is on silent.
I'm sorry?
My phone's on silent the entire day. My phone is on silent.
Your phone is on silent the entire day. Okay, and that probably helps you. But even with that, going back to your example, you might, of that 5-item list that you talked about, you might determine this. Brian Tracy, I think, is the one who talks about this. What is the one thing that if I solved it today would be my most meaningful breakthrough, would help me achieve the best result? And if that kind of guiding question is in front of you when you're doing your work, you're going to pick better things. You're going to say, what's going to monetize? What's going to drive sales? What's going to improve customer relations? Whatever your priority is, then pick the activities you need that are going to bring you there. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so anything else for the moment you wanted to mention? Yeah?
Curious about downtime. Like, what's a normal amount of time to spend on downtime a day? And sometimes you end up spending, end of the day, I'll come home, it's a long day, plan to spend an hour in downtime and do something productive later, but that ends up becoming 2 hours, 3 hours of downtime, which is completely wasted.
Right. I don't know if there's a definitive answer to a question like that. I think every one of us rolls a little bit differently, both in terms of when we're most productive, how much time we need. I do believe you need to listen to your inner clock and listen to your body and listen to the various things. Sometimes we want to work so hard that we burn ourselves out physically and emotionally. When I first transitioned into what I do now, I worked exceedingly long days and I was up late at night and creating content and trying to do things that were generating, and I took a step back and I started to think about the importance of self-care, enough sleep and exercise, eating properly, doing various things that we need to do because we're not machines. Right? We're people, we have to regenerate, and we also need to have space to be able to clear our minds. If you're in it all the time, it's hard to see outside the rabbit hole. But if you can sort of give yourself a little bit of space, take a day on occasion, for example, not to do work, but just to think. And if a day is too long for you, block out an hour or two, where it's all about just being thoughtful and mindful. Where am I? Where do I want to go? How am I aligning with my vision? How am I aligning with my goals? Right? Am I really consistently moving towards that or not? Do I need to reimagine what the goals are? Right? Sometimes we need to pivot and draw it back and start again. So all of those things we can only do if we get out of the work and sort of give ourselves the clarity. That's one of the reasons. I don't really love long commutes, but sometimes in the car is a good time to think. Things like that.
Touching on what he said,
yes.
He said that let's say if you do have your downtime, and you feel like you have gone too long on your downtime, and now you feel like, I wasted so much time. What's a good mindset or thought to think of that to get you back out of that slump, and let's say not have that wasting time again, or
sure,
sort of fall back
I
in?
think there are two parts to it. Number one, you want to ask yourself, why did that happen, or how did that happen? Sometimes it's just a matter of I started browsing, and then I'm on Fox News, for example, and I clicked that little, or Shiva News, whatever, and I clicked on the little button on the right side there because there was a little compelling story, which took me here, which then took me here, which next thing I know I'm reading challah recipes or something, like something like totally out of like left field, because that's just the way the web is. We surf, we bounce, right? The bounce, you've heard of bounce rates, right? The idea that people don't stay on a site for very long. The old Head and Shoulders commercial. You don't often get a second chance to make a first impression. Remember that tagline? For those of you old enough to probably populate a couple of grades in your beard like myself, right? Okay, so that idea is also true for your web presence. It's true for what you share on social. There's a lot, when you're engaging with people, they want to quickly size you up and all of that. So one question would be, what did I do wrong that brought me here? But the other question that I discerned from what you were asking, tell me if this is where you were going with it. To me, we could beat ourselves up all the time about mistakes that we've made. If anyone here has not made a mistake, please see me afterwards. I'd like to get to know you better. But for the rest of us, the humanoids in the room, who have erred, right? We've all made mistakes, and some of them have been very costly, financially, emotionally, relationally, etc. And so we always want to be able to get that back and say, well, I can't believe I did that. I'm just going to kill myself for it. On the other hand, the only thing you really can do in most cases is to make a commitment to do better. Turn the page. Be willing to say, okay, whatever happened, happened. I lost that time. I'll never get it back. But how can I use that at least as momentum moving forward? And if you do, by the way, your time moving forward could be even more powerful than it would have been. Right? To use the Jewish concept for just a moment, if I will, about tshuva me'ava, right? The idea that if we sin, sometimes the repentance process and the growth that results from that could be so powerful and compelling, it actually makes me a greater person as the result of the erroneous and faulty behavior I engaged in previously. So you can always pick yourself up and move forward.
He's saying the mindset is it should be starting a new page. But the question would continue would be is, let's say you fall down the page again.
Well, then you have to ask yourself, why does this keep happening?
So the
and
question
there's probably something in your process that needs to improve, right? I mean, you have to decide what is it that's going wrong. And if you're not sure, ask somebody, right? I mean, again, if it's a web surfing type of thing, which everybody gets pulled into, then you have to ask yourself, well, how do I? And there are things where you can put a timer. You could set limits to what you do so that you don't go too far off. And again, if your calendar is buzzing with things you are scheduled to accomplish, you're going to be your own best friend in terms of making sure things get done.
And the risk of getting involved in some psychotherapeutic process that I've had involved in is that.
1 second, there's a couch right there. So.
It's we sometimes we lie to ourselves, right? And we avoid things. We avoid pain, or we avoid or conflict, stuff like that. So it's easy to sit on the couch or whatever. And but if we're intellectually honest with ourselves, because you put your head in the pillow tonight, there's a little voice in your head saying, "What the heck did you do that for?"
That's right.
So it's a matter if we can identify through us or other processes or people that care about us enough to take our cheeks and say, "Glenn, what the heck are you doing?" To define what are we not confronting, right? It's it could be something very small, something big.
One last point from my end, and then we can see if we can jump into the other pieces, is that if you have something you want to accomplish, and you don't necessarily trust yourself to get it done, not because you're bad or anything, but you fall short often, you may want to set yourself an accountability partner. An accountability partner would be somebody you get together with maybe once a week over coffee or over the phone. Each of you had goals that you set for that week, and then you turn to that person and say, how am I doing compared to my goals? And discuss what went well and what didn't. Just the act. It's like interesting, even if I went outside and had a conversation, I'm not encouraging anyone to do this, and if you see me doing this, please don't think of me as being totally nuts, but if I were to go outside and have a conversation with a light bulb, right, that actually, at least in the purpose of, let's call it soul searching or improving behaviors, whatever, that would actually produce results. Just the very act of talking it out would produce some kind of benefit for you. Obviously, if you do it with a real person, and a real person who's invested in your success and knows how to ask the right questions, you're going to get even more. But just the act of sort of creating that direction is going to be meaningful and positive. So very quickly, I already talked about myself, so let's move on. You have this anyway. Let's jump into some of the strategies here. Okay, just out of curiosity, again, because I want to be good on your time, happy to stay later, but I don't want anyone to lose out. If we did as follows, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You see the numbers? 3 across and then 4 or 5 at the bottom. Which one, if we could focus on that one and achieve some meaningful conversation there, would be most valuable to you? Please just show me with your fingers. Stay positive is 1, set goals is 2, become gritty is 3. Gritty, for those of you not familiar, has to do with being persistent. so I saw a bit of a range, and that's fine, so that means we just have to do everything. Okay, no problem. The first one, by the way, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, because I think it's relatively straightforward. Okay, but we do understand that sometimes there are just going to be challenges. We talked about a challenge before that was in many ways outside of ourselves, which has to do with whether or not this other person wants to do the deal with us, whether they're going to follow through. But sometimes, and you don't need to identify yourself in this context that I'm about to describe, but sometimes we start to ask ourselves, is the problem with me? Right? If I'm not creating deal flow to the level that I need, if I'm not having enough conversations with the right kind of clients, is the problem here? And in many cases, we start to become our own, doubting Tom, so to speak. And we wonder if we have the goods. Now, I'm not telling you everybody's cut out for any industry, and there are assessments we could take. MBTI is one. Skills, is it Skills Finder? No, there's another one. Tom Rath, and I'm forgetting it now. Something 2.0. That also would allow you to understand like what your skills are most aligned with. But you're all in this industry, so that's not really the question right now.
What was
The quote, but
Could you repeat that?
Tom Rath.
What was those two skill things?
Well, MBTI is Myers-Briggs, and then the Tom Rath is I think is it Skills Finder? I don't know why I'm sort of drawing a blank here, but it's a resource where you could understand more about what your unique skills are. Take an assessment, and then you read the book and all of this. Anyway, so whether it's listening to encouraging drushas or talks from whoever motivates you, whether it's somebody within the community or a Tony Robbins or a Les Brown or whomever, there are people who can sort of just get you juiced and get you thinking in the right mindset and understanding. In most cases, there are people with bigger challenges than you have that are killing it. And I don't mean that about anyone here. I'm talking about to myself too. There are people out there. It's not always because people have more skills than we have that's allowing them to succeed and we're not. But that also means that with a different approach and perhaps with new tools, we could also be performing even better. So thinking about, I have the ability, I haven't tapped into all of that potential yet. There's more that I can do, and sometimes I just need to ask the right questions, attend the right seminar, read the right book. There are always things available to us. And we shouldn't feel like we're just locked in a cage and kind of spinning our wheels like a hamster with no place to turn. And if you look at yourself in the morning, every day in the mirror, and you give yourself a little pep talk, and you say that you can do it, and it sounds kind of foolish or silly, but that's the reality. We need to be our own biggest supporter, right? It's great if our spouse or other significant others helping us. It's great if we have others within the office that are supporting us as well. But at the end of the day, the fire has to come from within. And that motivation often comes because we feel we have the ability to do it. And that kind of leads me to, not a different point yet, but something that I think is just useful for you to be aware of, something called growth mindset. Have you ever heard of growth mindset before? Okay, growth mindset was popularized by a woman by the name of Carol Dweck. She's a professor at Stanford University. She came out with a book in 2006 called Mindset. And she unpacks, really with an emphasis on education for students, but it's relevant to adults as well. In effect, without getting too deep into this, growth mindset basically says, I can do it, and if I can't do it, I can't do it yet. It's about thinking of your brain, even though it's technically an organ for the scientists in the room, if you think about it as a muscle, right? My brain can grow, my skills can develop. I can do things if I put my mind to it, etc. So oftentimes, it's just thinking about, do I have the right tools in my toolkit? If I'm not succeeding, what do I need to do differently? But eventually, with the right approach, I can get there. Okay? Again, moving quickly for now, because I want to at least touch on the various points. And then if you have specific questions about any of them, by all means, feel free to let me know, and we can talk about it afterwards. Number 2, set SMART goals. The one that probably is most informative about what the goal actually is, and really attributes responsibility and all those things would be number 1, specific. You all see that? It's really like your 5 W's, who, what, where, when, why, that kind of thing. All right, or how. And so if you set specific goals, then it focuses your mind, and it creates a barometer by which you can start to measure progress and hopefully success. So let's unpack this just a little bit more so you get a better feel for what this could look like. And we'll talk specifically about specific. Okay? So it's your who, what, why, and how of a SMART goal. Right? Who will do the work? What will they do? Why is it important? How will I achieve it? And how will I make this, how will it make us feel? And I like to attach, by the way, the emotional piece to it, because we're emotional creatures. We often operate in an intellectual space, right? We like to think of everything as being clear and logical, whatever, but a lot of what we do is emotionally driven, both in terms of how we interact with our clients and how we motivate ourselves. So the more we think about the benefits of what the outcome will look like when we're done, the more we're motivated typically to get it done. So just for a moment, if you flip back to 35 and then 36, without actually reading it with you, you will see that I completed for you an example on the right side. Okay? It's sales related. It's not specific to this industry. Okay? But you'll see that there are specific things that this group is trying to accomplish. It's the sales team. And then you have a variety of components underneath it about how it's measurable and attainable. The more that this is realistic and something that you can achieve, and you know what it looks like when you see it, and you can measure, did I get there or not, or to what degree, the clearer and better your goal is going to be. Okay? So I just compressed a minimum of a 30-minute presentation, if not longer, into less than 5. So please forgive me for the accelerated nature of what I just shared with you, but at least it gives you a perspective. Let me show you one example of a SMART goal written in slightly more elaborate form. Okay? I hope you don't mind if I read it with you just to keep myself up at this late hour. In order to complete a proposal, which is my specific goal, I will set aside 30 minutes at the outset of each morning for the next 4 days for in-depth, uninterrupted work. That's my what. Now, if I paused right here, would anyone like to comment on what I just said?
Can you use the calendar, for instance, that idea, taking 30 minutes a day?
I blocked it.
And blocked it out.
It's on my calendar. Okay, what else is there?
And there's a very specific goal of doing what I'm going to do.
Very specific goal. I'm going to complete a proposal. Not all of your actions can be so clearly defined, but probably many of them can be. Okay, a lot of the tasks that you do are things you can clearly define and know when you're done. Let's keep going. By completing this important task first thing in the morning, I can do it while my mind is freshest and still attend to many other tasks and responsibilities afterwards. So I'm sort of rationalizing why this is important and why it's important to do it at that particular time. During this time, I will not answer phone calls, respond to emails or texts, or engage in any form of web surfing. And that's how I'm going to achieve my goal. Now, obviously, it doesn't always look like this. It could be, calls you're going to make or clients you're going to reach out to or whatever. It could be very different depending on what you're trying to accomplish. And here's my emotional piece. When the proposal is completed, I will feel as if a huge burden has been lifted from my shoulders and that I'm infinitely closer to closing this deal. Okay? Thinking about it from an emotional standpoint, building that in, is an important piece. And by the way, it's also valuable when you do good things, you should reward yourself. When you feel that you have succeeded, don't take it for granted. Don't just say, of course I closed this deal, that's why I'm in business, right? Every deal should be, depending on the size, depending on the amount of work involved, depending on other variables, you may choose to go small or large, but some kind of reward is always useful because it keeps you motivated, it keeps you going. And you want more of the same. You want that feeling, that excitement, that drive. Okay, so let's briefly recap what we talked about in the formal part of our presentation. Number one, trying to be engaging in positive thought, right? Thinking positive thoughts. I can do this, sort of psyching yourself up, listening to others, help psych you up perhaps. Having powerful messages maybe up on your wall, or some things you could refer to. Sometimes when a client writes you a note or an email, and you've done something well, have a little drawer that you could just pull open and get a little shot in the arm of things people have said about you, that are uplifting, right? Oftentimes we think about, it's the teacher that I had in this grade or this person who touched me in this way, and they believed in me, and that's what kept me going. right? We have to believe in ourselves, but if other people believe in us, that's going to help us as well.